guys, it's Ray. Welcome back to yet another video. Thanks to my mom for spreading my videos to everywhere across the entirety of the universe. Today we will be doing the case of the Black Dahlia, which has remained one of the longest unsolved crimes in American history, and it's a very brutal case. I wanted to cover the Black Dahlia case because that's what kind of really got me into crime. It's what really got me into, interest in forensics. What got me into researching crime stories was the story of the Black Dahlia. That's what we will be covering today. So we're going to start talking about the Black Dahlia herself. She was better known as Elizabeth Short. So she was born in July 1925 in Massachusetts. Her parents ended up splitting up, and she stayed there in Massachusetts with her mother and her 4 other sisters. She alternated between that and Florida in her younger life. But, that's mainly where she was, in Massachusetts. We know that she was seen as a wild child. She very much wasn't like that. She very much did not fit the small town girl kind of persona that she had been born into. Really wanted to get out of Massachusetts. Think of someone that really just wants a start to a new life. That's her. We also know that she was an aspiring actress. Even though she never did any acting work, as far as I'm aware of, she very much heavily wanted to do acting work, and she told everyone how she wanted to be an actress. Another thing is she was known for being extremely beautiful. Very beautiful. That's how everyone would talk about her. That's what everyone would say. They would comment on her beautiful blue-green eyes. They would comment on her hair, her body, everything. She is beauty. If you think beautiful, that was what they thought of back then. Okay, so when Elizabeth was about 18, 19, she ended up moving out to California with her father. She lived by San Diego, not directly in San Diego, but she lived right there. She didn't end up actually staying with her father for long due to her lifestyle. When she went out there, they had agreed that she could go live with him if she did housework and chores. That way it's one less thing that he needed to worry about. But she would go out partying at night. She wouldn't really ever be home. She wouldn't do anything she agreed to do. And so her father ended up saying, this is not working out for me. It's becoming a lot harder on me to have you here when you're not doing your part. And so he ended up kicking her out. Which, fair enough. Obviously it's her father, but I understand why, because she never really lived with him her whole life, and it just wasn't working out in that situation. So Elizabeth ended up actually going down to San Diego, and she met a woman named Dorothy. They quickly became, close friends, and, Dorothy ended up letting Elizabeth stay with her because Elizabeth didn't have anywhere to stay. She stayed there for about a month, so again, not that long. She was very much a pick up and go kind of person. She told her friend, Dorothy, that a man named Red will be coming to pick her up, and she is going to be moving on to, the next venture of her life. Sure enough, someone did. While she was in San Diego, she was spending time with this Red guy, also known as Robert Manley. He was one of the first, suspects of the case, but we'll get into that later, of why he was not found guilty. So Robert was the one who gave her that ride out to LA, and was, this Red guy that she had told Dorothy about. So, they were dating for this time period. So that kind of explains that. It was I don't know if they're officially a thing, but they were a thing. Another thing you should know is Elizabeth was known for sleeping with a lot of people, especially famous people, None of those I'm not going to really dive into, but she's very much known for being very promiscuous, is how I will phrase it for this scenario. Elizabeth is 22 years old. A lady was out on a walk named Betty Bersinger, and on her morning walk, she found the remains of Elizabeth in the middle of the grass, in the middle of the suburbs. Like, I'm going to put a picture here. It's going to be like a cover-up picture. I'm not going to be putting any of the violent pictures in this video, but if you want to, you can definitely go look them up. So she was found there in the middle of the suburbs. She was so pale that Betty, when she found the body, she thought it was a mannequin at first. She didn't realize that it was a body. There was no blood left in that body when it was found. There was no blood on the grass, on her clothes. I believe she was naked, but if she was wearing clothes. You know, I've researched so much of this case, you really think I'd know this, but I completely forgot. But there's no blood found anywhere. Like, she was completely drained of blood. So we're going to really talk about how this body was found. But she was so pale that at first glance you might think it's a mannequin, but when you got close up, you could very quickly realize it was not the case. So, the interesting thing is her body was found cut in half. Very surgically cut in half. There wasn't any bruising on internal organs or on bones. It was super surgical cutting around the middle, like right by her belly button, where she was just completely cut in half. But that's not even the worst part. I will not be placing any photos of this because they're honestly horrifying. But you can find pictures of her face. It was cut from like corner to ear, right up in there, both sides, to create this haunting forever smile. Another thing is she had big dashes just cut across her forehead. Some other interesting facts about how this body was found. There are crisscross cuts on her, her vagina, on her pubic area. There are crisscross cuts found there, and on her right thigh. Interesting enough, and by interesting I mean like very creepy, on her right hip, a literal game of tic-tac-toe had been carved into it. So this sick person, whoever killed Elizabeth Short, carved into her right hip a game of tic-tac-toe. Someone had to be the X, and someone had to be O. So I don't know if there's like two people, because that would be like really sick if there's two people carving into this poor woman's hip. Also, her right boob was literally cut off. She was missing her right boob. Not even like try to censor myself there. Her whole right boob was just removed off of her body, which a body comes with two boobs. No matter your gender, you technically all have boobs. But it didn't even look like she had surgery to remove her boob. It was just clean cut off her body. So, it's just the level of, like, I don't know. The only word I can think of is vandalism done to her body. It's, like, extremely bizarre and extreme. There are markings around her neck and on her wrists that she was strangled. They believe that what happened was she was strangled to death. And that's how she died, not by any of the cuts on her body. And that she was definitely... So, back to where it was, they found the marks on her wrist and on her neck. So she was definitely strangled to death. And she was tied up by her wrists and her ankles. Also, another interesting fact is we don't believe this is what the killer did, but it could have been. None of her toes, except for both of her big toes. So both of her big toes were like freshly painted this very vibrant red. Only her big toes. So if this was a thing the killer did, very confusing. Another thing about how the body was found, her intestines were literally removed and tucked underneath her butt. So not only was she cut up, her body was mangled and contorted, and this was very much what someone decided to do almost for fun, was just got up her body. So they could tell that the body was not killed there, due to there was no blood anywhere. And if her body was drained of blood, which is what it obviously had happened, no way it could have happened there. Plus, it was in the middle of the suburbs. So if she was to be killed, they wouldn't have just stayed there to kill her, strangle her, tie her up, then do all this meticulous cutting, then leave the body there. Like that. So obviously, body wasn't there. Plus, another interesting fact is when you die, your blood all kind of just goes and stays at whatever direction you're laying. So if you're laying on your back, your entire backside, that's where your blood will go. And your skin will turn a dark color due to the blood resting there. Well, we could tell that she had died facing down due to this discoloration, which means she had been moved and placed on her backside in the middle of the suburbs. The only way that they could determine who this was, because please keep in mind this body was extremely cut up. No one was identifying her until they had no clue she was. The only way they were able to was because Elizabeth, years ago, had been arrested for underage drinking. And so her fingerprint was in the system. And so I guess you can kind of be thankful for her being arrested, because if she had never been arrested, we would have never found the body. Like, we would have no clue. Well, we would have found the body, but we'd have no clue who she was. We would not have been able to identify her. We would have just known that there was this horrendous murder. And I think that whoever killed her was probably hoping that no one would be able to identify her. I mean, that might be why they did so much, massacring to her body, was they didn't want anyone to recognize Elizabeth. They did it on the wordplay on the film of Black Dahlia. Not Black Dahlia. The wordplay on the film Blue Dahlia, which had just come out at that time. Also, lots of people were saying it was because she wore lots of black. Someone else said she had black hair. I don't believe she actually had black hair. But these are just what lots of people said, why she was called the Black Dahlia. But the most believable one, and the one I'm going to use here, is there was a play on the movie The Blue Dahlia. The LA Examiners started getting these really weird, creepy letters from who claimed to be the killer. I'll put them up around here. They were really creepy. They were made up from cut up newspaper clippings. So basically, in my mind, it's like a really creepy third grader's art collage. And they were sending these as letters. The first one that was sent said, after this letter, you'll be getting the Dahlia's belongings. Not shortly after that letter, they did in fact got tons of mainly paper belongings of Elizabeth Short mailed to the police department. So Robert Manley, aka, Red, her ex-boyfriend, was one of the first suspects, but he was found not guilty fairly quickly. Not only a week before the murder did he go back to San Diego, he passed a polygraph test, and later on he ended up being in a mental institution, and they gave him this truth serum, which also revealed that he did not kill Elizabeth. I don't really trust this truth serum, and it sounds more like it was a form of abuse in this mental institution, but again, I don't really know. I just think it's a weird thing that's a thing that they were seriously considering as a fact of part of the case, was his results from this truth serum. People did start confessing to this murder. The first person to confess to this murder was a man called Joseph Dumas. I think that's how you correctly pronounce it. If it is not, I'm very sorry. But, so this dude claimed that he probably, or that he did kill Elizabeth. But he said he didn't remember anything, but he was pretty sure he did it, and that he must be the one that had done it. But he wasn't. He really wasn't. Not only did they find that he was mentally unwell during this time period, they also found that the only connection he had is that they passed out drunk together once, him and Elizabeth. So there was not really anything connecting, and he didn't really know any of the facts of the case. He was just claiming that he must have done it. I think what happened was the police had asked him, and because he had passed out drunk, maybe he thought he had done it, but there's nothing connecting him to this murder. And so even with his confession, with nothing lining up, they could not arrest him. Now we are going to start talking about who I believe is the correct murderer of the Black Dahlia, and what many people at the time suspected, and was basically the biggest lead suspect of this Black Dahlia murder. In fact, his own son believes that his dad killed the Black Dahlia. So we're going to be talking about George Hadal. He was a very well-known doctor. He had done very, intense and specific surgical training. So he had most definitely had the ability to do those cuts that were found on Elizabeth's body. He knew what he was doing. He was known for his amazing skills as a doctor and a surgeon. So that right there poses up a possibility of, able to commit this crime. Another thing is that people have said that George was briefly dating Elizabeth. Whether or not it was actually official or not, they would see her over at his house a lot, and they'd be around each other all the time. So they knew each other, and that again puts another connection between the two, that he knew her, and so, maybe they broke up, or there's something going on and didn't end well, so it could have been a revenge crime. So this started adding up as, it's George. George is the one that killed Elizabeth. So photos were found in George's photo book that looked a lot like Elizabeth. But they did testing, and by testing, they had a forensics artist look at these pictures compared to pictures of Elizabeth. At this time, Elizabeth said that there was an 85% chance that they were not the same person. But with newer technology, they were able to put through face identification technology, and it gave a 90 to 95% chance that it was Elizabeth Short in those photos found in George's house. So one of the letters sent by this murderer earlier in the case had actual handwriting. And so they compared this handwriting to George Hadal's handwriting. And they said, lots of people looked at it, but the most they got was a probable. No one could say it was for sure. There were some people saying there was no way it was the same, but other people were saying, it's likely that it's the same thing, but it came back conclusive, and there was nothing that they could use as actual flesh proof that they were the same handwriting. So another interesting, is how I'm going to phrase it, thing was George did have a slight record. His daughter, when she was 14, claimed that George had raped her. So his daughter claimed that he raped her, that her dad raped her. And so this apparently did become a case, but it was not found. It was dismissed, he was not found guilty. And she had ended up being pregnant, but she ended up giving this child up for adoption due to her father pressuring her to. He also kind of tried to force her into an abortion before, the baby was given away. It obviously didn't work, but the fact that he did is kind of suspicious to me. George's son, Dave, I believe his name was Dave. Yeah, Dave. Charles' son, Dave. Wait, let me check. Let me make sure it's Dave. No, it was Steve. So Steve Haddell, George's son, Steve Haddell. When he became older, he became a police investigator himself. When he was working there, he did find connections between his father and the Black Dahlia murder, but he couldn't really investigate much into it due to the case being dropped and closed. But he definitely started looking into this, and that's when he really started believing that his father was the one who killed Elizabeth Short. More reason to believe this was a cover-up was the police was known for being very corrupt at this time, so not only was it kind of believable, they had put tapes into his house. He was, tape bugs, and they caught him talking about the Black Dahlia murder, and also they heard him saying something about wanting to work with the police, and, all of the physical evidence of this case disappeared into thin air. So it went from having physical evidence to no one knew where it was. Sorry for all the noise. I have this crime gremlin walking around my bedroom at the moment where I'm recording, so if you hear noise, it's probably him. Now, another person we'll be talking about is a woman who ended up confessing to this murder. I do not believe this woman is anyway guilty of this. I'm pretty sure she wanted to jump on it for the press, and that's how lots of people viewed it at the time. But because she was a woman, this became very sensualized. It became very popular in the media because she was a woman who was saying that she actually had been living and dating Elizabeth Short. She said that her and Elizabeth Short had been together. They'd meet up in hotels. They were a thing. She claimed it, and don't really have anything to back it up. She was very adamant on the fact that she had been in a relationship with Elizabeth. But the story did not line up because she claimed she had, in anger in finding Elizabeth out with another woman, had stabbed Elizabeth. But none of the wounds matched the stab, and also, if she had been stabbed, there would have been blood everywhere, not how the body was found. Because, this was the 50s, and in the 50s, sadly, LGBT rights were not really a common thing that was... they didn't exist. People did not talk about being LGBTQ. It very much was a under the table kind of thing. You never talked about it. So the fact that this was a woman confessing to being with, living, and loving this known sexual being, which is how we were going to phrase her, they found this as horrendous. Lots of people, it's oh, this is unnatural. This can't be allowed. Lots of people were making such a big fuss. And the media brought so much attention to this part of the case just due to the fact it was a woman dating a woman. There were murders leading up, before Elizabeth's murder in 1938. These are called the Cleveland torso murders. The reason why they believe that is because the bodies that were found from the Cleveland torso murders were very, very similar to how Elizabeth's body was found. So many people definitely believe that this could have been a serial killer sort of scenario, which had committed the torso murders and then ended up moving out to the West and while out west committed the death of Dahlia. There's nothing actually linking the two murders except for how the body was found, but lots of people would not be surprised if they were the same killers. I personally do not believe they are the same killers because I believe it was George Hodel that killed Elizabeth. I don't know. I like to keep like an open mind sort of thing, but it's kind of hard for me to do that with this one because everything lines up to George. Everything does. It also definitely seems like they were covering up George's involvement in the death of Elizabeth Short. Lots of people believe that Steve Hodel, George's son, is only claiming that his father killed the Black Dahlia because he found he was a suspect and now he's just trying to use it to get media attention. Steve has written several, and I mean 3 different books on his father being the murderer of the Black Dahlia. Like, he's committed to the idea that his father was the one who killed the Black Dahlia. Like, he's not letting that idea drop. He still says this while many people believe otherwise. He is very much sticking to that story. He's been on several news places. He's really just been trying to push out the fact that his father was a murderer. I believe that his father is the murderer. I just don't understand why Steve wants to get so much attention from this, because if your father did kill Elizabeth Short, wouldn't it be more of a negative light towards you for being the child of a murderer? I don't know really the mindset that Steve was in, or Steve, is in, or whatever, on this sort of scenario. I'm just saying, like, my personal interpretations of what's going on, and obviously it could be wrong, so I'm not gonna claim I'm right, because I really don't know. If Elizabeth Short had been with Christine, which there's no evidence proving that, but let's say she was, this could have been a form of a hate crime, especially because she was one of his exes, or someone who had definitely been around him. They obviously were no longer together, so it could have been, maybe if she went to another woman instead of with him, it could have been a hate crime. It also could have been out of spite of her dumping him. There could have been an argument. There could have been so much to be a motive, but we don't really have an exact motive for why he would have killed her. Please let me know what y'all think in the comments below. Really, pass me your guys' opinions. But that was the case of the Black Dahlia. Let me know what other cases you guys want me to cover. I definitely want to keep doing more of these. Please like, share, subscribe, and have a nice day.